Hi Nick, great to have you today for this interview. How are you
Thank you
doing?
for having me. I'm very well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, we would like to know more about what is men's coaching and men's work. So, I'll quickly post my first question to you. What is true masculinity? And along with that, a little introduction about yourself and the work you do.
Okay. For me, masculinity is a very individual thing, and discovering what masculinity meant for me was part of my journey and part of living a life of not knowing what it meant to be a man, not knowing what I needed to do to feel like a man. Um, I ended up in a very difficult place and ended up with various addictions and becoming very unhappy in my marriage and with my career. And I went on a bit of a journey for about 3.5 years of traveling and healing and inner reflection. And on doing so, realized what it was that I needed to shift my life and the direction in which I wanted to go. And part of that was discovering the fundamental lack of healthy male role models that I had in my life growing up, and how it had created a void in my life, and it left this gap of what do I need to do to become more masculine or to become more of a man. Um, so for me, masculinity is an energetic principle that exists in every human, not just man and woman. And a lot of people mess up. They think when we talk about masculine, they think we're talking about men, just as if we talk about feminine, they think we're talking about women. But each male and each female human on the planet has masculine and feminine energy. Typically speaking, men have more masculine and women have more feminine, but it's not always the case.
Mhm.
So for me, true masculinity exists not in what a man does, but how he lives his life. So this comes down to his integrity and his ability to protect and provide for others, to care for others. There's compassion and kindness, but there's also strength. There's also power in his ability to stand up for what is true and what is right.
Mhm.
And there are different traits of the masculine which I aspire to have. And for me, that is the true essence of masculinity.
A little about your background, yourself, and a little bit about your work. Can you
Okay,
tell our
so
audience?
yeah, I studied for many years and worked as an architect, and I was married
Okay.
and very unhappy with my life. I had a very beautiful life. We had plenty of money, and my wife was incredibly beautiful. My ex-wife was and is incredibly beautiful. Um, and from the outside, it seemed like I had everything you could possibly want, but
Mhm.
I was void of purpose, and my life lacked meaning. So I tried to fill that with partying, drugs, porn, and all these other things that
Oh,
kind of they numb us from
yeah,
feeling.
that yeah, I think most men that's like first go to just escape the pain.
Exactly. And it took me a long time to realize, but I was numbing the pain of the reality of my existence. And growing up in Australia, it's very common. It's more common than not to drink alcohol. So from the age of 16, you just start drinking beer.
Hmm.
Up until I was early 30s, I was 33 when I just realized that actually this has never served me and it doesn't serve me. And it allows me to kind of drink the pain away. And by stopping that, by giving up porn, by giving up drugs, by giving up all these things that help numb who I was or what I was feeling, I was then able to sit with the pain and learn from it. And that's the pain is where our greatest treasure lies. And we so often we don't want to feel it. So we kind of sidestep it or we numb ourselves from feeling it. So I did this for 3.5 years of just really, truly feeling my pain and feeling what it was that I needed to do and how I could overcome that and how I could walk through the flames rather than trying to walk around them. And in doing so, I met a whole bunch of different healers and mentors and gurus, and tapped into a whole lot of practices, meditation and yoga and plant medicine and breath work, tantra. And these modalities allowed me to heal everything that had gotten me into the place that I was, of this deep unhappiness. And from there, I realized that actually I wasn't the only one, and that there were many men who were in a very
Many.
similar
Yeah.
position, the majority of men. And from that point, I was then able to go back to where I was living in Berlin and start to help those in need. And I started with a little men's circle, and then that turned into an online men's community, and then that's turned into coaching and
Mhm.
workshops and mentorships and these kinds of things.
Okay, that's great. That's really amazing. Overcoming your own drawbacks and then doing it for others. It's great.
I think that's a lot of people have difficulty finding their purpose in life, and I think for many, their purpose lies in their pain. Because
Absolutely.
once they learn to overcome that pain, once they learn how to get through it, how to heal from it, the lesson in it, they can then teach that to others. And
Absolutely.
that's one of the most powerful gifts you can have.
Right. Like, uh, yeah, I think I felt this need to connect with you and connect with few other men's coach to because I think most of the Indian men have to go through this kind of coaching because in my personal experience, I have faced that where I'm unable to find the kind of energetic match or the vibrational match, and most of them wouldn't reveal that they are a lot into drugs, smoking, and porn addicts. But then I was getting energetically affected. So yeah, I had multiple failures with relationships, and that's when I realized like there is some serious change that men in India need.
Mm,
While these ancient practices were invented in India, but we have kind of forgotten it. And I personally believe at least Tantra practices should come back to my city.
mm,
So, yeah. And you introducing and telling about your work today is going to make a great difference.
beautiful.
Great. So, our next question. What is the project Leaders of Men all about? What is the podcast focusing?
So I had this idea. Um, a lot of men on social media, a lot of people on social media, people look at them and if they're in a position of leadership or teaching or something, they put them up on this pedestal. And it's like, oh,
Mm,
I can't do what that person's doing because then they look perfect and they've got everything perfect. And it can be quite disheartening for a lot of people. Um, so the whole reason behind Leaders of Men is to showcase men that I see that are in the field of masculine leadership that reveal a bit of depth about their lives. So things about when they were last out of integrity, or when was the last time they cried, or things that really allow us to see the humanness within them. Um, and I think it helps a lot when you can actually see that it doesn't matter how high up a person is or in what leadership role they are, that they're actually human as well. It just gives it gives us a lot more a greater ability to tune in and connect with that person. So that was the whole reason behind the podcast. And I've finished the first season. The second season is now recording. And it's fascinating. I really love it because I get to speak to these men that I look up to and really feel who they are on a person to person level.
Right. Um, so your podcast would continue, right? And you would be taking them more frequently, uh, just so
Exactly. Yeah.
that, yeah, people, uh, at least our audience, who would be watching this particular interview, can always go
Yeah.
to your
So
site
it's,
for
yeah, the idea
podcast.
was that it was 10 men, 10 questions.
Okay.
So the first series is done, as I said, and the second one is being recorded. So that will start to be released probably next month in
Okay.
September. Um, and then it will just evolve as it needs to. And at some point, it may change format, it
Hmm.
may change guests, but for now, it's
Right.
as it stands.
And most of the men's coaches, in which part of the globe are most of them taking courses like the one you do?
In which part of the country, of the globe, are most of the men?
Yeah, most of the coaches like you, one like yourself.
It's an interesting question because in most countries there is a very large need for
Hmm.
men's coaches and for men's work. Growing up in Australia, it's for me. I understand how desperate that country is, but at the same time, there is a massive men's movement in Australia. Same in
Oh,
America.
that's
I
amazing.
can see, yeah, America. There's a huge men's movement. Places like Germany, there is a real desperate need for it, but there is not so much happening. In England, there is as well. There's a lot of cases where there's a lot of countries where there's a massive need for it and there is a conscious movement. But then
Hmm.
there are some countries where there's a massive need for it, but there is no movement. And it's a very difficult field to step into when nobody
Yeah,
really wants it. The women know they need it. The women know that the men need it, but
yeah,
it's difficult for a woman to say to her man, you should go work on yourself because suddenly the ego goes up and it's like, well, I don't need to. A man doesn't want to know that he is incapable because it makes him feel less worthy.
hmm,
So,
right.
I've had instances in Germany where I've had friends say to me that they're not going to come to my men's circle because they're
Oh,
not into it. Yet I know how much benefit it would be for them.
right.
But there's just too much resistance. And if there's so much resistance, then they're just not ready. You can't force anybody to do anything they're not ready to do.
Absolutely.
And only once that inner desire kind of burns bright enough will they then step forward and do it. But until then, it's just not their time.
I I feel men's coaching and men's work is required more than ever because a lot of marriages are breaking and it's not giving a healthy move, and plus yeah, the soul growth is not happening, and especially in India I think there is only one person who is doing it, but it's not a blend of spirituality and the real work.
Mm.
There's only one person, I can't quite remember his name now. So
Yeah, I mean, I imagine India is a very, very
it's required.
large audience for this kind of work.
Yes.
Um, so if there was any man that, and this is also part of
I think this particular interview could be an inspiration.
part of the challenge is a lot of men they want the work, they're looking for it, but there's nothing there. And this was in my case when I went back to Germany, I didn't know where to find it, so I started my own.
Hmm.
And all it takes is for one person, for one man to say, okay, I want to start this. And then to get a few friends, maybe three
Yeah.
or four friends, and then start a men's circle. And you hold a men's circle every week or every second week. And then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you start to talk about it with other friends, and then more people come. And then suddenly you start very small and you start to get bigger and bigger, but you just start. All you
Right.
have to do is start. And
Absolutely. No.
there's no right or wrong. And a coach said to me once, how did the first person ever learn to swim? So, because there's nobody
Yeah.
there to teach him. He just tried it
Okay.
and he made mistakes and then he tried it and he tried again and he tried again and he got it. And yeah, all it takes, if there's anybody listening to this that really wants the work or wants to look for the work, then just start it.
Amazing. So that's an inspirational message already going out. Great. So our third question. What services do you offer to help men embody sacred masculinity? And tell us if you're offering online coaching as well.
So I do offer online coaching. Typically, that's in a container of 2 to 3 months because it's easy enough to just transfer information from one person to one person, but there's no transformation that comes from that. The transformation comes over a period of time with accountability and with checking in and with really kind of pushing the client to the edge of their comfort zone to go beyond the places that they had been previously.
Mm-hmm.
I also do an online men's course, which goes for 2 months. And the next one I'm about to, within the next week, I'm going to start to advertise that. And that's an 8-week program where we look at the masculine archetypes. So we go into purpose and integrity and sacred intimacy and sexuality and basically everything that I wanted to learn, I needed to learn when I was younger, and I wish somebody had told me. So it's kind of like I'm coming back and teaching my 18-year-old self again.
Yeah.
And we just finished the first cohort, and it was incredibly powerful and beautiful, and it's super exciting. It's really, I know how beneficial this work is, and that's
Mm,
why I'm trying to get it and push it as much as possible.
exactly. I think most of us, like you said, we only learn about all these things only after we have got enough of damage done to ourselves, and only at 30, 35, we come to know about a lot of these things. But
Yeah.
you're doing a great work because the more people get to know about coaching like these, so even the teenage community, the teenage group can also get into it as soon as possible. I look at it in a very optimistic way. Yeah.
Same.
So the
And there's more
sooner,
and more.
yeah, people do it.
So there's more, and I was just having this conversation this morning. There's more and more men that are younger, in their teenage years and in their 20s that are
Yeah.
already finding this work. Whereas I didn't start this until I was 33. So
Oh,
there
so
is
you,
more and more men,
okay.
younger men getting into this, which is a really beautiful sign.
Oh, they're
And then the next,
approaching you for this?
yeah, yeah, they're coming into the men's circles, and then I have parents reach out to
Hmm.
help their sons. And this is the next
Brilliant.
phase of the work that I'm working on with a couple of friends, is to actually take this kind of work into schools,
Wow.
and to help boys as teenagers rather than wait until they're damaged men later on in life, but to try and get in there early, because that
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
feel is
Much
the most
required.
powerful. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the teenage time would be just perfect for people to get molded. Yeah.
yeah,
In the way they want to. It's not something that is induced from outside. Yeah.
exactly. It's just a revealing of their own truth rather than, when I grew up, if somebody asked me what does it mean to be a man, I would think, well, they have to have sex, they have to have a job and a car and a house, these material things, and perhaps it's fighting, perhaps it's driving a car. Like, I just really had no understanding of what it takes for that true
Mm-hmm.
masculinity to be revealed. But if I was 18 and somebody came in and said, hey, I know that this is what you're going through. I know this is how you feel. But, this is something, there's truth in this. And you just tap into it and feel if it resonates. Rather than somebody
Right.
coming along and say, hey, you have to do this and you have to do this because, yeah, there's all this fear that gets projected onto kids rather than just coming from a place of love and saying, hey, what do you feel about this? And
Mm-hmm.
through that space, through that kind of mentorship and guidance, I find the most power can come.
Right. That's great. So yeah, our next question. Uh, why do most men do not take responsibility about their part of mistake in marriages, which lead to breakups or yeah, a broken marriage? The
Um,
person did.
I can't. I mean, I've been in my own broken marriage, so I understand the intricacies of it, and
You'll know more. Yeah.
each marriage is different, and there's a lot of focus today on the shadow side of masculinity, or
Mm-hmm.
this very, it's almost frustrating phrase, toxic masculinity, because masculinity is not toxic, not at all. It's just that there's a shadow side of masculinity which people um, can be afraid of, and it's like there's a darkness to it, just as there's a darkness to femininity, and it's not one's to blame more than the other because they both
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate. It's the system that we live in that perpetuates the pain and the shadow of both. When I came out of my marriage, my partner had an affair, and I
Oh.
was very much in playing the victim role of
Mm-hmm.
she did this to me. And everywhere I went, I was like, oh, well, she did this to me. And then after a little while of reflection and of kind of living my life, and I started to realize that actually she didn't do this to me, that I created this because of the way that I was. I created this situation where this happened, which became the greatest gift she ever gave to me. And it was this really beautiful transformation of, wow, this is the best thing that ever happened. But
Realization.
before that, I was in my ego. I was playing a victim. And I was, well, she did this to me and I'm hurt and it's her fault. And it's like, it's just not how it is. I think for a lot of men, I mentioned it before, there's the ego side of it. And to realize that the marriage broke down, it can't be their fault because that would mean that they're incapable of doing something correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to just push the blame. It's easier to say, well, no, it's her fault. She did this, she did this. It's like, yeah, but what I teach men and women is it's about total responsibility for your own actions, because we create our reality. And it's easy to sit back and blame others. Oh, well, this is happening and they did this, so now I have to suffer or I have to do this as a result. But what can we do? Now, just say your husband is the dick and he cheats on you, or it's because of him that breaks down the marriage, whatever. What can you do? Where can you take responsibility? Where perhaps the responsibility is you stayed too long in the relationship. Perhaps the responsibility is you weren't strong enough with your boundaries. Perhaps how can we as individuals take responsibility? And then for the men, it's like the ego will continue to suffer until we
Mm-hmm.
realize that we don't have to identify with it. Yes, my wife had an affair. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was heartbreaking. But what was the lesson in that? My ego suffered. So what? I'm not my ego. I don't have to identify with the part of me that is my ego. My true inner being was not affected. My ego was affected. So the lesson that comes from that, and there's a saying, it's not about, or the moment you stop saying, why is this happening to me? But what is this for?
Mm-hmm.
Why people say, oh, these things are happening to me. It's like they're not happening to you, they're happening for you. So there's
Yeah.
always a lesson. There's always something that you can learn and something for you to grow from within relationship. And for me, I always come back to full responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if
So
that answered your question, but I can't
yeah,
answer it for every man. I don't know why.
yeah, it's like each person will have their own kind of experience, but they're pretty much the
Exactly.
same. So yeah, I think in that case, yes, most of the women also do the same thing where we think we are the victim, but it's not the case. And yeah, I've applied that on
Mm.
those lines. Uh, so now, just to support that discussion, I want to know if both people take responsibility of their actions, how can they come together and again mend the relationship? Now, like I know that's possible, but then it's not possible with one person alone. Yeah.
Yeah, in some instances, it's not about mending the relationship. Some relationships are not meant to be mended.
Okay.
My ex-wife, I love dearly, and we are very good friends, but we're not meant to be in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what we took from our 10 years of being together was there was a lot of growth. We met when we were very young, and we spent,
Mm-hmm.
I was, early 20s to early 30s. It's kind of the formative part of my being an adult. And we spent this together. We were traveling the world together, and we learned a lot together. But in the end, the lessons had dried up. There was nothing else for us to learn. So we had to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if in relationships we both take responsibility, then you can come to that understanding. You
Yeah.
know, can you meet my needs? Can I meet your needs? Do I want to meet your needs?
Both ways. Mm.
Exactly. And for instance, you come together and it's like, look, I love you. I've taken full responsibility for where I'm at. But for me, I need to move on. And then that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We have almost this cultural pressure that we have to stay in a monogamous relationship our entire lives.
Mm.
But if it's no longer healthy, if we're no longer learning, or it's no longer serving us, then for what? Um, and I think that is when it can become dangerous.
Mm. Okay. Great. So our next question, moving on. Fifth question. What situations led you to be a men's coach? How did you find your purpose?
So as I mentioned, I was pretty unhappy in my life. I had no real purpose. I was working as an architect, yet I knew that it wasn't what I was meant to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I traveled through Central and South America for a number of years and spent a lot of time learning breath work and meditation and different types of plant medicine, and got myself to a pretty comfortable place where I was at within myself. There was a lot of self-reflection. There was a lot of healing that had happened, but I still lacked direction. And I was back in Berlin, and people had said to me, oh, maybe you could help my partner. Maybe you can help my boyfriend. And then other guys were like, oh, maybe you can help me. No, I didn't really align. Not it didn't align. It didn't really sink in.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was actually in Rishikesh, and
Oh,
it was in December, I think, 2018, and I had a conversation with a friend about a book, and I just finished reading The Way of the Superior Man by David Data, and we were
oh,
speaking about the
yeah.
book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover,
I'll post the
and then
description. Yeah, I post the
yeah,
link because I've just seen the summary of it and it seems to be good.
oh, it's The Way of the Superior Man is it should be compulsory reading for all men. It's really powerful. So should King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Okay.
Um, and I was sitting in a cafe in Rishikesh, and then kind of my spine straightened, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end, and I
The
realized this is
Kundalini
exactly oh, and I started
awakening.
crying. I was sitting in a cafe and I was just crying into my tea, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I'm here for. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And from that point, I went back to Australia. I did a few more trainings in Thailand, and ended up in Australia and started my first men's workshop.
Hmm.
And then went back to Berlin and started a men's circle, and then it just moved from there.
That's amazing. The other book title, or could you mention it to me in the chat? I can put that up later.
Yeah, I can. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Great. So, our last question. One message for the couples of India.
For the couples of India, I think the most powerful message, or the most powerful realization for me, is to learn to take full responsibility for where you are at personally, for where you're at in your life, with your purpose, with your health. You know, we live in a society where we want to give away our power so other people can take care of us. And
Hmm.
that's a very, very unhealthy perspective. Everybody wants the government to take care of us. Everybody wants somebody else to come in and save us. And the reality is that that's not going to happen. The day that we take full responsibility for who we are is the day that we learn that we are in full control of our lives. And if you take that into relationship, and sometimes I still forget, and I'll find myself, oh, well, you did this and you did it. And it's like, hang on, no. But what is my part in this? What have I done? How can I be better? How can I create more safety? How can I create more structure? How could I support better? Can I do more work on myself? Is there a blind spot that I have not seen?
Hmm.
And the more work you do with coaches, with reading books, with men's groups, it's much easier for somebody else to point out where you might not be seeing something that you're doing wrong, or you're doing perhaps in a way that could be done differently.
Hmm.
And once we take full responsibility for ourselves, we can come together as a couple without the you did this and you did this. But it's like, hey, shit, I'm sorry. This is how I was behaving. I'm going to try and do this a little bit differently. And then the partner can be,
Yeah.
oh, hey, look, I didn't realize I was projecting all of this stuff onto you. I can see this
Mm.
now. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And once we
Right.
learn to fill our own cups, we learn to fill our own needs as individuals. We don't need somebody else. A lot of the
Hmm.
codependency in relationship comes from, I'll come into a relationship with my cup half full, and then I
Hmm.
need you to fill the rest of my cup. And then I'll fill the rest of your cup, rather than coming in as two full cups. And then whatever I give you or whatever you give me, it's just icing on the
Overflow.
top.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then if something happens and you leave, I'm still full.
Yeah.
It's not
That's
like you leave
so.
and half my cup
Mm.
is gone. And
That level of
this,
understanding
yeah,
is needed. Yeah. And you also mentioned about Tantra. So, how Tantra can is really going to bridge these gaps. I personally feel that's going to bring a lot of change in marriages.
Mm.
How do you look at it to
I
heal
mean,
relationships, especially marriages and
it's hopefully different in India, but Tantra in the West has been, um, it's kind of been brushed with this, okay, well, that's sex,
hmm,
which is
but
completely
that
not accurate. It's
yeah,
like Tantra is this lifestyle, and it's this, one of my favorite things a coach ever told me was that if Tantra was a forest, the sex would be a leaf of the forest. It's like, it's so small.
I totally second that.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, in the West, anything Tantra is sexual related.
Mm.
I
So
see it.
other
Sorry.
than that, what is Tantra? Yeah,
Yeah.
from your
So I
perspective.
see it as a pathway to consciousness. Like, how can I bring more love into my life, and how can it elevate me closer to God?
Hmm.
And if I can tap into as much love as often as possible, then I am tuning deeper into the resonance of God. And for me, that's the essence of it. And I think
Great.
if you bring that into relationship, then you can't help but benefit the relationship.
Absolutely. Amazing. This was a beautiful conversation. I'll as well put up the links for the two books you mentioned. Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks for your time.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me.
And hope you become the soul architect.
Thank you.
See you.
I'll I'll put in the book